You're looking at one of the most vital, valuable, and, well, volatile arteries on the entire planet. And right now, it is absolutely on a collision course. I mean, think about it. Packed into this one region is a staggering amount of the world's economic lifeblood. We're talking a third of all global shipping, crucial fishing grounds that feed millions of people, and just massive untapped energy reserves waiting right under the waves. So the big question is, right, how did a place that is so incredibly valuable become a source of such intense and, frankly, dangerous tension? That's exactly what we're going to break down. To really get what's happening today, we've got to rewind the clock, because this whole conflict, it really began with just ink on a map decades ago. This isn't just about ships in the water. It's about competing histories and these deeply contested lines. So the story of this central claim kicks off right after World War II. Back in 1947, China's government drew this 11-dash line around most of the sea. A few years later, in 53, the new government tweaked it, got rid of 2 dashes, and that created the 9-dash line that is so controversial today. Then, fast forward to 2016, a bombshell ruling from an international court changes everything. Okay, so what is this 9-dash line everyone talks about? Well, picture this vast U-shaped line that basically carves out about 90% of the South China Sea. And Beijing's justification for it? It's not based on coastlines or anything like that. It's based on what it calls its historic rights to these waters. And this right here gets to the absolute heart of the legal fight. You have 2 completely different ways of looking at the world. On one side, you have China's pretty unique claim of historic rights. And on the other, you have the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. We call it UN Close, which is what almost every other country on Earth follows. And UN Close is super clear. Your rights at sea come from your coastline, not from an old map. Which brings us right back to that 2016 ruling. An international tribunal working under UN Close delivered a crystal clear verdict. It said there was simply no legal basis for the 9-dash line. Now, China rejected the ruling, called it invalid. But for the Philippines, which brought the case, and for a lot of other nations, this ruling is the final word on the matter, legally speaking. But let's be real. These competing claims, they're not just about history or legal principles. They are about what lies inside those lines, an almost unimaginable amount of economic value. Yeah, just let that number sink in for a second. Over $5 trillion in trade passes through this sea every single year. Any disruption here doesn't just mess things up for Asia. It sends shockwaves through the entire global economy. And if you break it down, you can really see just how dependent we are. A third of all global trade, nearly a third of all oil shipments, and a massive 40% of the world's liquefied natural gas trade flows right through this one corridor. It is, and I'm not exaggerating here, a global artery. And hey, that's just the stuff floating on top of the water. Down below, on the seabed, the U.S. government estimates there are at least 11 billion barrels of proven oil reserves, and some surveys suggest there could be way, way more. For a region that's hungry for energy, that is an enormous price. Okay, so when the stakes are this high, you know the fight isn't just going to stay in the courtroom. It's moved from legal papers to actual concrete and steel. We are now seeing the most incredible military buildup this region has seen in decades. Get this. Since 2013, China has basically built over 3,200 acres of new land out in the Spratly Islands. To put that in perspective, that's bigger than 2,400 American football fields. They're doing it by dredging up sand and piling it onto reefs to create brand new islands where there was nothing before. So what are they building on all this new real estate? Well, as satellite analysts love to point out, it's not condos and tiki bars. These things are fortresses. We're talking deep water naval bases, military barracks, and runways long enough to handle bombers and fighter jets. But the strategy isn't just about building these static fortresses. It's also about a really clever use of force in what people call the gray zone. China uses what are called cabbage leaf tactics. They'll surround, say, a Philippine vessel with layers of ships. The inner layer might be fishing boats, then bigger Coast Guard ships, with the actual Navy hanging back just over the horizon. It's all about intimidation, right? You win the standoff without ever firing a shot. So what starts as a neighborhood dispute has, unsurprisingly, pulled in powers from all over the world. The South China Sea has gone from a regional issue to a major global flashpoint. Okay, so who's at the table here?
First, you've got the main players, the primary claimants, with all their overlapping claims. Then you have what we call interested parties: the US, Japan, Australia, nations with defense treaties and huge trade interests at stake. And now you're even seeing powers from Europe getting involved because they're worried about freedom of navigation and international law. And you can tell things are getting serious because the diplomatic language is getting, well, a lot less diplomatic. A statement like this from the US ambassador, it isn't just noise. It's a really clear signal of an alliance. And it's a direct condemnation of things like using water cannons on ships. It shows just how much positions are hardening on all sides.
So, what does all this mean for the rest of us? Well, the ultimate price of this conflict isn't just paid by the countries on the map. It's paid by the entire global system in the form of instability and, you guessed it, uncertainty. And I'm talking about real-world costs, things that are happening as we speak. Insurance for ships going through these waters? It's getting more expensive. Companies are literally spending billions to create backup supply chains just in case. And with every close call between warships, you have this constant simmering risk that one little mistake could spark a much, much bigger conflict. And that really brings us to the bottom line. The fight might seem like it's over a bunch of rocks and reefs, but the cost is paid in the currency of global stability. The $5 trillion question isn't just whether a war can be avoided, but whether the world can really afford the price of living under this constant and growing shadow of uncertainty.